Welcome to Voices Beyond the Spectrum. Real stories, brave voices, radiant perspectives. This is the podcast for parents and caregivers of autistic and neurodivergent children and teens. I'm your host, and each week we hold space for honest conversations, shared struggles, and hard-won victories from those who truly live it. You're not alone. Your story matters, and it starts here. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Voices Beyond the Spectrum. I'm your host, Carla Chinen, and today we have a very special conversation dedicated to the fathers in our disability community. Too often we hear experiences of mothers, but today we're creating a space to hear from four incredible dads whose journey have been shaped by love, resilience, advocacy, and unwavering commitment to their families. Each of them brings unique perspective, but they all share one thing in common: the desire to build a more inclusive world for their children. First, I'd like to introduce William Argueta. William is a husband, father of two boys on the autism spectrum, autism advocate, and the owner of J&J Catering and more. After more than 15 years of working in government security and law enforcement, he made a life-changing decision to step away from his career to focus on supporting his sons. Today, he uses his family business not only to serve great food, but also to promote autism awareness, inclusion, and community support. Next is Anthony Chinen. Anthony is a devoted husband and father of two children on the autism spectrum, raising both a son with high support needs and a daughter with low support needs. He works for the United States Postal Service, and he serves as treasurer for Empathy for Autism California. Through his dedication to his family, his work, and the nonprofit community, Anthony continues to advocate for a greater understanding, acceptance, and support for individuals with disabilities. Joining us as well is KJ Johnson. KJ is a proud father of three incredible children, including his 17-year-old with Down syndrome and two other children with neurodivergent needs. His journey as a father has given him a deep appreciation for patience, perseverance, and celebrating every milestone. He is passionate about encouraging other fathers to stay engaged, be present, and recognize the incredible strength within their children. And finally, we welcome Michael Mason. Michael is a proud father of two sons and dedicated caregiver to both his son and his mother-in-law. His caregiving journey has strengthened his compassion, advocacy, and commitment to serving others. Currently pursuing his bachelor degree in social work, Michael hopes to combine his lived experience with his education to help individuals and families access the resources and support they deserve. Gentlemen, thank you all for being here today. I truly appreciate your willingness to share your experience, your challenges, your victories. I know this conversation is going to encourage fathers, educate professionals, and remind families that they are not alone. Hi, everyone. I hope that today's conversation helps other fathers feel seen, heard, supported. So let's begin. Many parents remember the moment when they realized something might be different or the day they received a diagnosis. Can you guys take us back to those early days? And this is an open floor where you guys feel comfortable to answer whatever you guys do feel comfortable answering. So I'll leave it up to you, gentlemen, to start the conversation.
I can start.
Perfect, KJ. Thank you for starting us.
I'm KJ, 42 years old. My son Christian is 16. He'll be 17 this year. And he has Down syndrome. So way back in the day, when me and his mother at that time got the diagnosis from the doctor, honestly, I didn't know what to expect. You know, oh, your son's gonna have Down syndrome. Okay, but what does that mean? You know, I think my baby mama cried at the time because I think it probably scared her. The only thing that did, the diagnosis, was show me where his mother was in life, because that's kind of where she eventually broke off and she left for the most part. And so I pretty much had my son by myself figuring out what this life was going to be like. Asking questions, learning the beginning of the road of looking for resources and what that looked like. That part was the easy part. I'll say that.
Thank you very much for sharing that and, for being vulnerable over a situation like that. So can you expand on your journey, William, and how you experienced that diagnosis?
Yeah, how you guys doing? My name is William Argueta. I have actually two boys on the spectrum, so I have two different testimonies on. Yeah, I get emotional. It's like you get the feelings all over again. I think the first time it was when Josiah, my oldest, he's going to be 10 next month. He was about 2.5. He started lining everything up. He already knew. His vocabulary was amazing. He knew already like 50, 60 different dinosaurs. It's just very bright kid. But I noticed that, he would play to himself. My siblings have other kids as well, my nieces and nephews, and he wouldn't want to engage with them and things like that. And I told my wife, you know what? I feel like something is wrong with Josiah. And at first my wife was in denial. She's like, no, it's okay. It's just, us Hispanics, se le pasan, things like that. So once kindergarten hit, I remember like it was yesterday when he was walking out of class, the whole class was in a straight line. It was about 25 kids, and the teacher had him by his hand. And I have that on video. I recorded it for my wife because she was working, and that's when I knew, man, something's wrong with my son. He can't walk the straight line with the other kids, and that's when I sent the video to my wife, and I said, hey, this is at this point now it's serious. He's at school, he's not able to, engage with other kids and do what other kids are doing. And long story short, 3 days later, teacher called us and said, hey, I want to have a conversation with you guys. Okay, definitely. We had a meeting, and that's when she didn't diagnose. She didn't want to be out of scope, but she said, "Hey, your son is he's showing the characteristics of autism." For me, I felt like my whole world came down. I didn't show it to my wife. I had a poker face. Now I could talk about it because I feel comfortable talking about it. But back then, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I remember my wife crying. And I said, "Hey, hold on. Let's take the right measures, to take the right procedures." And we did that. Took him to a psychologist. Had him, diagnosed through the psychologist in the regional center, and he was autistic. So I told my wife, okay, we're gonna do what we have to do. We're gonna be proactive. I think we were ready for it. I was ready for it. As his dad, when you have your kids, when they're born, you make a promise to yourself to be a man and to take care of them. And I held such a poker face for years, but in the inside, it was tearing me up. But yeah, long story short, we got him the services. We rocked and rolled. We had to learn what with autism. We had to learn the characteristics. We had to learn how to help ABA therapies, things like that. 5 years later, Jordan was born. Same thing. Once he hit 2 years old, we started seeing the same characteristics. Josiah was having, but he was nonverbal. And I was out in a contract out of Chicago with the law enforcement agency. My wife called me and said, "Hey, Jordan's doing the same thing. We got to get him diagnosed. We got to see what's going on." And I came back from Chicago, and I took him to the school district that was supposed to be his home school for TK. And he got diagnosed by the school psychologist, and they said he's autistic. I said, okay. I wanted a second opinion because I just couldn't believe it. So we took him to our psychologist, his Josiah's psychologist. She said, yeah, he's autistic. And I remember I had him in the back seat, and I just looked in the sky. And this is the only time I asked God why. The only time I asked God why. I looked up and said, why? But at the same time, I looked back, I looked in the rearview mirror, and I said, you know what? I can't ask God why. I just have to push forward, and do it for my kids. And that was one of the hardest experiences of my life, knowing that I had two boys on the spectrum. It was truly hard. I fell into a deep depression. I gained a lot of weight. It was very hard for me because I just had a poker face for so many years, with my wife, my family, my siblings, my parents. And yeah, that's my story. That's how I handled it. That's, their emotions come every time I talk about it, I get it all over again. But I'm able to talk about it now, not like before. I just hit it.
It's a very vulnerable situation, and the fact that you're able to now to speak about it, and like you mentioned, every time you speak about it, it almost reignites that grieving, that
It does.
processing of the emotions. It can be healthy, but it can be very overwhelming at the same time to have to process it all over again. But thank you very much for sharing that. I
Of
know it's
course.
easy. I appreciate that. How about you, Michael?
Hello, everybody. How you doing? My name is Michael. I'm 45 years old. I think the first time when I found out Brandon with his medical condition, I believe he was a year old. We took him in for his checkup, and the doctor said, "Hey, did you realize Brandon has a enlarged liver?" I'm like, no, never noticed it. I noticed when he was smaller, he used to cry a lot, always fussy, and we just never realized what was going on. So 1 years old, we found out he has a condition. This is very rare called glycogen storage disease. There's so many. This one is glycogen storage disease 3A. So, when we found that out, I didn't know nothing about it. It's so rare that the doctor, they didn't even know nothing about it. So we first went to the hospital of LA. We only had to see a specialist through metabolic, and it didn't really work out. So the first couple years, he had a special diet. Very. We had to give him cornstarch and protein every 4 to 6 hours. We had to give him cornstarch and protein when he's a baby. So through the nights, that was even challenging because we had to set our alarm clock for 5 hours. Every 5 hours, wake up, give him his bottle with cornstarch, and because if he don't get that cornstarch, he can go into a diabetic coma. So that was really scary. We started Googling things. That was even scarier. because we didn't know that too much. So when I Googled TSD, you start seeing this, you start hearing that and seeing that, you're like, wow, it's, it has to do with muscle weakness and his heart problem. It helps, cognitive and all kind of stuff. And it was, for the first couple of years, really challenging, even when he was going to school. And we finally got it. We started going to the metabolic specialist out in Orange County, which we started really knowing a little bit about his medical condition and things like that. So he's moving. We still have them days, some days I don't know. Sometimes I break down, I have a lot of stress, anxiety, and work is I gave up with going to work right now. I mean, I get on that freeway. Sometimes the wife say, "What are you doing back home?" I say, "I can't do it. I can't go to work." They call me in office all the time for attendance problems. And I'm just, I got to the point that it's real bad for me to even go to work. You got so much going on. Then you try to put on a smile and go to work, and it's just challenging.
Thank you for sharing that, Michael. And ain't that something, huh? When we are struggling at home and then we still have to put on a happy face for the whole world to see in order for
Right.
us to be able to continue providing. Tony, do you want to share your experience with the diagnosis?
Absolutely. So before I start that part, I want to go ahead and say, hi, my name is Anthony, 43, and Carla is my wife. I'm her husband, and I just want to start off by saying thank you for starting this podcast, this father's podcast. I think it's going to benefit many fathers that hear it. And first and foremost, thank you for that. I'm honored to be on. So going back, roughly 13 years ago or so, Adrian, we too, like William, have two kids on the spectrum, but I'm a specifically talk more so about Adrian because he is on the severe end of the spectrum and he's our firstborn. So I want to say about when he was about 8 or 9 months or so, everything was well. He was eating, just about everything we were giving him. He started to even, baby babble words. And, we were like, wow, this is great. This is amazing. He's developing well. And then shortly after, Carla started noticing signs of regression. There were certain fruits that he no longer wanted to eat anymore and other food items. His speech began regressing and even his motor skills. So, we went ahead and made the decision to go and see his pediatrician and, see what was going on. Because, like you gentlemen conveyed, I knew nothing about autism at that time myself, So, with the assistance of Carla, she helped me, and I tagged along with the pediatrician appointments. And then from there, we were able to go see a speech pathologist and a neurologist and all the specialists. And long story short, we finally got the diagnosis. And, I remember we were at the Kaiser in Riverside and across the street was a pizza place and we had to pull over because, Carla couldn't drive anymore. She was just too emotional. She broke down. And we knew then and there that's where the journey of knowing we had a child with autism began. And, we hugged each other, we cried together. And then thereafter we said, hey, we're problem solvers, and we said, let's get to the drawing board. What do we got to do? What we got to do? What resources do we have to find? Who do we have to talk to in terms of getting the therapist? So, man, Carla, who's my hero, she started kicking doors down and she said, what? Okay, this is the ABA company. Initially, they didn't want to give him the diagnosis. And she said, no, something's wrong here. You will give him the diagnosis because he's clearly diagnosed with autism. And sure enough, we got the diagnosis. So we started the ABA therapy in home. We started speech therapy, occupational therapy. And yeah, that's where the journey began. All that early intervention, it was a big deal. It was a lot, but we began seeing the progress in his development.
Well, thank you for sharing that, babe. And I
Welcome.
appreciate everything. And like you mentioned, I had a background in psychology, so I knew that the autism was there. But when the doctors really tell you that he has autism, it just hits different. And I think that's for all of us. So now knowing that, how did that experience compare to what you thought or imagined fatherhood would be like? So I'll start with you, KJ, because you've been quiet.
I've been listening. I've been quiet. I've been listening.
Yes.
So my experience, how I thought fatherhood would be like, man. I think we all kind of. I'm assuming that we've all been there, because as a father, you're on 525. I thought, I was gonna be able to pull out my kids in all these sports and karate and taekwondo, and I can get my baby ready to go to a HBCU and become part of a fraternity, like because I didn't have that opportunity. No, I couldn't do any of it. I had to reroute my whole thinking of being a father to my boy and what that looked like. 'Cause nothing I thought that was gonna happen was able to happen. So yeah, I had to redo everything.
Right.
Not only that, I had to do it by myself because his mom left. And so I was a single dad going through that by myself and having to go through, that breakup and that nonsense. However, it strengthened me and I was able to regroup. It made me a bulldozer of a father because I was able to see my son being left out. I was able to see people looking at my boy like he was something different. A lot of hurtful. Just a lot of things hurt before it got better. I think even today, because my father-in-law took my two little boys on vacation, and my son said, "Hey, Dad, I want my friends to come over, so they can play." I'm like, I'm still trying to figure out who they are. You know what I'm saying? At 16 years old, my boy doesn't have, he doesn't have a best friend. He doesn't have solid friends. I'm his best friend. My wife is his best friend and his brother, but he doesn't have friends of his own. That
Right.
till today, that hurts. So I mean, every year, no matter how, he's 16 now, so every couple years was a new discovery, a new process, a new thing to figure out on how to make my son's life as happy as possible as a father, but I was blessed. My son does soccer, my son does baseball, I tried to put him in taekwondo, but it's too much physical activity, so he wasn't having that,
I know.
He's been in dance class for about, this will be his 5th year starting in August. So I found some great people, some great communities, and he is able to do things. You know what I'm saying? And he's been great at those things. Not like I originally planned on what that would look like, but what he's able to do, he's good at it. So that's how that affected me.
That's amazing. And honestly, kudos to you. I've serviced a good amount of families, and a big reason behind doing these podcasts with men, doing the event like we're going to do on the, June 28th for the fathers, and acknowledging you guys, because I think a lot of the times whenever you hear the word father, it usually comes with what is father not doing, not what are you guys amazing fathers are doing. And I think that credit needs to be given to you guys. Being a father, it's already a hard work, but being a father with a child with a disability, and in a society where you guys are expected not to feel anything or not to show emotion, to constantly be the rock for the family and not break, that has to be exhausting as heck, because as much as we women sometimes complain and whatnot, we always can rely on other women and have that village. And I know for you guys as men, it's a lot harder to build that village, to create those connections and have that vulnerability with one another, because culturally you weren't raised to be like that. You're expected to, quote unquote, it's ridiculous. It's, you guys being a man is being able to be vulnerable, being able to open up to your loved ones, being able to be your true self to your children. So back to that question, I bring it on to you, William. How did those experiences compare to what you imagined fatherhood to look like?
It was definitely hard. I mean, when my son was born, my wife's like, yeah, his name is Josiah Ali, so his middle name is Ali. It was my love for boxing, and obviously I had these high expectations for a dad to have your kids do the sports that you love. And my son Jordan, when he was born, I named him after Michael Jordan. I love basketball and boxing, and it turned into a complete opposite. You know what I mean? But it's definitely hard as a dad to do that, because you see other kids playing sports. For example, my siblings' kids, they're in travel ball, jujitsu. My older nephew plays basketball, and it's crazy, to kind of go off topic. My sister, the other day, she had told me, "Hey, Will, how come you never go to my kids' games?" And I told sister, "Hey, I'm so busy with the boys, I can't." And for Mother's Day, we had a little get together, and she asked me again. She's like, "Hey, the boys' championship game is on this day. Are you able to make it?" I said, "I can't." And she was a little bit like, "Why not?" And I said, "You know what? I just looked at my whole family and said, you know why? Because I'm jealous, guys. I'm jealous. I'm honest. I'm being honest. I'm jealous that you guys get to experience that and I don't. I said, so give me my space and let me grieve the way I want to grieve. And if I don't want to watch your kids play sports right now, it's okay. I'll do it later. And the reason I say that, because a few years ago, I went to go watch them play football and I was so excited and cheering. And I remember I see Josiah, my oldest, he was reading a book on the sidelines. And I was cheering, high fiving. My brother was there. My dad was there. You know, it was a championship game. Driving home, I'm never going to forget this. My oldest son goes, Dad, will you ever cheer like that for me? That broke me. That broke me as a man. And I looked at him and I said, I cheer like that for you every day, son. Anything you do in life, anything you want to do, I'm always going to cheer for you like that. Just because I cheered for your nephew doesn't mean I don't cheer for you like that. You know, my son, he's 10, but he's very intellectual, very smart, you know, and the way he talks, his IQ is amazing. So for him to see, he saw me at a different vulnerable state of celebrating, you know, having a good time. You know, he felt that energy and he said that, you know, when he asked me that, that really hit me. And it was a little bit traumatizing for me to go to any of my nephew's game because I would never want him to put in that position where he feels like I can't cheer for him. So it's definitely hard. You know, it's a lot of trauma informed, you know, things that us that go through that others don't realize. You know, it's psychologically and traumatic. And yeah, it's definitely hard. You know, I mean, my kids are Ali and Jordan, you know, and it's the complete opposite. But hey, you know, happy and I cheer them on now and whatever they do in life. And, you know, I can't. There's no regrets.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you sharing that. How about you, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, everything you guys saying, it's all hitting home. Having someone with special needs with the medical side, it was definitely different. He's growing up, you know, hey dad, can I go spend the night over my brother's house? And this, because of his medical side, I don't. It's kind of hard for me to trust somebody for him to spend a night somewhere because he has to always take his, you know, that protein shake every 6 hours. So it's kind of hard in that sense because, you know, if you don't take that protein shake, it can actually go into a diabetic coma. And even with sports, it goes along with it. It's hard, you know, he gets tired easier. There's a lot going on. So definitely, you know, everything you guys said, it just really just hitting home. Like, you know, Brandon can't do this, he can't do that. And even with his friends, like, I think he has one friend and Mo's son, you know, he's 18. You know, it's kind of hard for me to explain to him, like, how come I can't hang out with the boys? Or how come I can't do this? Or how come I can't go spend a night? Or, you know, so it's really challenging. I feel bad because me and mom is always spending time with him, taking him to the movies and doing this and doing that, you know, and we're basically, I don't know what a date night is no more, you know, so we always just spending time with Brandon, making it, you know, getting him ready for life as much as we can. And definitely.
I'm actually in touch with your wifey, by the way.
Yes.
I'll
Yes.
help you guys out.
Appreciate that. It gets tiredness because you know, after a while, you get tired of advocating. I mean, we have to advocate for Brandon for everything, for him one on one. After a while, it just gets like, can I apply for something for my son for things that he needs, and without having to go to a hearing, without going to this next level? It takes a lot out of you as well.
It definitely does take a lot of advocating. It takes a lot of educating ourselves. It takes a lot of just sometimes having to deal with the systems. You know, some
Yes.
systems are not designed for our children, and it's
Right.
unfortunate. My mission, educate a lot of these systems to
Right.
make sure that our kids are included, that it really does become an inclusive community. So with that being said, babe, do we want to share your portion?
Absolutely. So yeah, when I first learned that we were going to be birthing a son, you know, I know it's pretty cliche, but as a father, and especially a newfound father, knowing that I was going to have a son, it was like, man, like, you know, I'm going to be able to teach him how to play a wide array of sports, you know, because played football in high school and wrestling, and I grew up playing basketball, and I had nephews prior to us having Adrian, and my nephews were heavily involved in sports, and it was just amazing to see, you know, and I was happy for them and just to see them developing their skills and playing basketball and such. So yeah, I was like, man, I'm gonna be able to teach him sport as he gets older, you know, just me being like a history buff or delving into philosophy or just science. I'll be able to touch bases with him and say, hey, what did you learn in school today, son? Okay, what are your thoughts about, you know, such and such topic? And I was just so excited and so elated to be able to really envision us doing that. So we got the diagnosis, and along with the diagnosis, we found out, you know, he also has cognitive delays. It was like, yeah, all that got put in the back seat. It was like, none of that's going to happen. And remember at that time being a new father and being fairly self-centered and immature, telling myself, man, like I wanted to teach him these things. I wanted to be able to show him what it meant to grow up in this world, to be a self-respected man and to enjoy playing these sports and learning, different things in the world. And, I remember one instance where I was throwing the football with my nephew at his house, and Carla was there, and she pulled me to the side. And my experience was a little different than Williams, but it was in this kind of same vein, which was she said, although your son cannot convey to you that he sees how excited you are throwing that football with your nephew, you have to be mindful that it may be hurting him, that he can't do the same with you. And like William mentioned, to piggyback off what he said, it broke me. It didn't. It never occurred to me at the time that this can be something that is really bothering him because I'm his father and I'm not doing these things with him. So I had to really chew on that and step up to the plate and say, okay, let me really delve into seeing what Adrian likes to do. He likes to draw. He's really big on art. He loves music. So if that's what you're into, I got to get more focused on getting on his level and figuring out how I can connect with him and show him that everything he's doing is wonderful and I want to partake in it as well because there are things that you can teach me about art and music, and vice versa. So yeah, although everything that I planned on, doing with him as a father, didn't materialize and I did have my detour. What I can say is I'm still blessed because, we're best of friends and the connection has only grown closer because like you gentlemen mentioned, our kids, it's very hard for them to establish friendships. So I'm his best friend and I'm honored to be. So as that connection has grown closer, he's showing me things that he is interested in. And I'm just so happy to see that he's learning these different things in his own way.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. And yeah, just to add a little bit more to that, I feel I remember even that day. And for me, as a mother, to give you guys that perspective, as a mother, when I would see that connection with him, with, let's say, the nephew, the first thing that would come to my mind is like, who the heck is my son going to connect with when I'm not here?
Yeah.
Who's going to really, if the dad is not taking the time to really connect with my son, who's going to be that person that's going to step up to the plate to treat him with compassion, with dignity, with respect? And he remembers it differently. We actually came home and we had that talk, really a serious talk, and it got to the point where I think a lot of marriages that have a child with disabilities, they always come up with the word divorce a lot of the times. And we did have that discussion. I said, you are either here physically, mentally, and emotionally, or you're not. You get your stuff and you go because you're not gonna be here. You're not gonna not be present during the bad times, but want to be here during the good times. We're all in or we're all out. We can't be in the middle at this point in time. And from that point on, he did an amazing job at really absorbing that constructive criticism and moving forward to really creating that connection with Adrian. And now, honestly, it's hilarious to sometimes see them and just their little quirkiness they do with each other and their little inside jokes that they have for each other. It's beautiful to see. So, as we move forward on this journey, how did becoming a father of a child with disability change you as an individual?
Am I probably we're going in order? I'm I'm down. I'm down. I'm down. How did it change me? Man, in many ways, it made me a super dad. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Because to tell you so, my son has Down syndrome. My wife is diagnosed ADHD. My 6-year-old is just now diagnosed ADHD with dyslexia, and my 10-year-old is diagnosed ADHD. So it has made me Superman. It has made me. 'Cause I grew up without my dad, so it made me like strong. It made me a leader of all because I vowed to myself that for one, my boys would never know what it's like to be without a father, and for two, being in our community, I've seen so many parents, unfortunately, hide their kids, not care for them as they would a mainstream child, not show them the attention. I've seen because like I've been in sports guys for years for Christian, and I've seen parents just drop their kid off and bail. While you got while you got a stand full of kids, parents cheering for the kids, that kid gone. That parent is gone. No cheer, no nothing. So I was like, I would never let a kid be without a cheer. So if they're gone, I'm right there. I'm in the field helping. I'm in the field, encouraging, whether the parent is there or not. It's made me the village leader for most villages. And I do this because I bring in and I try to loop in as many dads as possible to show that man, we in this. We are because it takes a certain type of person to be a parent to a kid with special needs.
Yeah.
Those I take my hat off to every single time. But I'm also I try to be inclusive, to include others. Last night, for example, all my kids, went to In and Out, and Christian recognized some boys from his high school, and they were saying what's up. My kid was excited, so I always make sure when I see kids who are great to my kid, I shake their hand, I introduce myself, I say, I appreciate you, because they're giving my boy that experience of having homies outside of school and actually, acknowledging my boy outside of school, outside of his, special ed classes. They seen him as, just Christian. That's it. Nothing more than that, just Christian.
Yeah.
Nah, man, it's made me a troop. It's made me a bully in many ways because when it comes to like services, I don't play.
That's right.
When it comes to, because sometimes, around the block, we got kids who play basketball and Christian to go outside and he'll stand there because he wants to participate, and you watch long enough, they'll ignore your kid. I'm like, give my boy the ball, and to let him play. And I'm like, thank you, little boy. I got bully little kids to make sure they don't ignore my boy, but I'm not gonna let them sit there and just ignore my son like that. I'm just not.
Yeah.
It's made me a great dad. It's made me, but what it did do though, it made me me because when his mom left, that's her. So when I got my wife, as amazing as she is, it took me so long to trust her with my son because I didn't trust nobody with him. It was hard for me to leave him with anybody. It was hard for me to trust her with him. So I was mean a lot of times because I didn't feel like anybody could look after him the way I did, but that was the downfall of it. But overall, it's made me Superman.
Thank you very much for sharing that, KJ. How about you, William?
Let me take it on mute because I got the sniffles. It's changed me in so many ways. I have good moments, bad moments, but you know, I gave up. I gave up my career for my kids. I gave up everything for my kids, and for me, it's one of the biggest blessings. I had dreams of gaining accolades. And doing different things with department, joining different departments, and doing different government contracts. But once my second son was diagnosed, I just turned in my badge and gun and said, "That's it. I'm done." I told my wife, I'm gonna focus on my kids. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna do it. And yeah, it was scary. It was scary, giving up your career. But it's changed me into a way where I became very resilient. I think for me, a lot of parents, on the spectrum, on disabilities, they have different traumas. For example, Anthony, his kid, he's a level 3 autism. Okay.
Yeah.
So my son's level 1. So what I explain to other parents when I meet them and they tell me, "Oh, you're so lucky your son's level 1." I laugh because I'm like, there's different traumas. With level 1, dealing with my kids is bullying, knowing they're different, knowing that my 10-year-old now tells me, "Dad, why am I like this?" And I have to get everything inside of me to be brave and tell him, "Hey, you are how you are, and God made you this way." So it's definitely it's just changed me in positive ways. In my marriage, the person that I am. In my career, I've seen a lot of things. I've seen murderers, I've seen child abuse, I've seen things that I can't even talk about. And that's nothing to compare to what I see now with my kids. But at the end of the day, it makes me stronger. And I believe that I've gotten closer to Christ. I feel like I found God again, and it's truly helped me so much, and it's a different experience, but I take it day by day, and it's just I don't know, it's different, but I'm truly blessed, and every day's different, one foot forward, and it's changed me for the better. A lot of my buddies in the department text me like, "Hey, how you been? Let's go training, let's do this, let's do that." And I'm like, I don't have time for that anymore, guys. My focus shifted to something else. Don't get me wrong, the love is still there, but my love for my family, my kids, it's just unconditional. You get married, you have kids, and you you're giving yourself an ultimatum when your kids are special needs. Either, like Carlos said, either here, you're not, and as a man, it's we're built different. We're built to do cool stuff with your kids, and take them fishing, and sports. But I love to sit down with my son and read a book. Talk to me about dinosaurs, talk to me about aliens. The things that he loves to do. So it's definitely a change, but I can't complain. I'm very happy about that.
And I think as our kids get older, for example, we also have a level 1 autistic, our daughter.
Yeah.
And that's where we can definitely I can see what you're talking about. They're more because they're more quote unquote high functioning. They're more self-aware of how society pushes them away a lot of the times. And
Yeah.
then comes a lot of the masking, which is covering up who they really want to be just to fit in with the peers or the people around them, which later on honestly affects their nervous system and their stomach. But that's another podcast for that. But with that being said, that's when raising awareness, it's about raising awareness on every spectrum, on every disability, and not comparing each other's situations. Everyone goes through different things. Like, I could never sit here and compare myself to another woman because I know what I'm also blessed with. I know the blessing it is to have my husband, to have my mother as support. I know not every person out there has that. So to be able to stay open minded and to be able to give grace to others and to ourselves in the whole journey makes this really a community. And that's when I really get upset when within our own community, sometimes you do hear certain comments and you're like, are you serious? We're all going through this together. We've all had those nights where we don't sleep
Yes.
or where we're at a hospital
Yeah.
or where we're at an IEP or, advocating for some other service that we need to advocate for. So why are we fighting amongst our own community? We have enough advocating to do outside of it. So definitely. How about you, Michael? How has it changed you?
You know what? It made me a better father, made me understanding, more patient. He has his good days and his bad days like anyone else. But really it made me more anxious because I'm always thinking ahead of the game, like, hey, what's gonna happen? One day if me and Jessica's not here one day, who's gonna take care of Brandon? I get way ahead of my game sometimes. Things like if I get sick, if this happened, what's gonna happen with Brandon? So I think it brings more anxiety and stress a little bit, being feeling anxious and just worrying the best thing getting Brandon as independent as possible. And I have to just sit there, pray more and keep advocating for him. And I think me and mom is like a pit bull. We just when it comes to Brandon, we just ready to bite. We'll be in public and he get overstimulated, he start clapping and then people just look at him dirty. I used to before say, hey, my son, okay, but now I just give them a dirty look, like, hey, I just say, you know what, be free, do what you have to do. I thank God for it. I wouldn't, want to change it for anything in the world. And, but like you, Williams, I said maybe the last couple of years, I'm like, I'm tired going to work, not in a bad way. I'd rather spend more time, advocating for Brandon, getting him ready for life. My wife would tell me, when it's time for you to go to work, you get cranky. I said, yeah, because, I'd rather be here with Brandon, he's summer school, just taking him places, spending time with him, getting him ready as life as possible. So it definitely changed me. It's all just, I don't have time, like, for anybody really. It's just my little family. Like, wherever I go, I bring Brandon because it's hard for me to, trust anybody, because I want to make sure. So even when his oldest brother, he snaps at him, oh, and I get mad at his brother. Hey, don't be yelling at him. Well, he's clapping it. He's doing this. He's doing that. I told him to stop. He keeps doing it. And it gets frustrating too. And, I tell him, I say, if you don't understand your brother, who else going to understand him? You should know what he goes through.
Yeah, thank you. I know the same thing happens here we get that here as well with Sophia and Adrian. How about you, babe?
Wow. So how has it changed me? Man, I'm gonna have to. I can't add anything further. I have to piggyback off of you, gentlemen, and it was very well said. It certainly made me more patient, right? Just growing, more patient with him, having more just empathy and compassion and understanding of him. My son currently is he's 12, but he's 5'7", 245 pounds. So when he goes through these moments of dysregulation, it could be a pretty horrifying experience, not just for him, but for everybody around him. He's very physically imposing. But one thing I did realize while he goes through these different moments is if I can conjure up in myself to stay as calm as possible, it just kind of transfers over to him and it minimizes the episode. And he feels that comfort from that. So yeah, he's really taught me how to just work on my patience, for myself, for my own sense of regulating my own emotional state and my mental state so that I can be that father and I can be that guided figure for him. I think it was just so important for that. He's also I've also changed in the way of, over this journey in the past like 12, 13 years, I've distanced myself from friends and even family. And when those occurrences happen, I was like, man, why can't they understand that, I'm here with my son and my daughter, and we as a family are dealing with this, and we're trying to navigate through this and trying to help them as much as possible. And if they really cared and loved us, why couldn't they just show their support? But I soon realized that, if people aren't willing to understand, they never will. So I had to let go. And so therefore, by letting go, I was able to become my true authentic self. I really realized that I was able to set boundaries and really be the person that I needed to be for my family, for Adrian and Sophia and Carla. And boy, what a wonderful blessing. I often tell people, my whole family, but specifically Adrian, he's taught me more than I have taught him as a father. And that's incredible that that has happened that way. But it has. He's taught me how to be compassionate. Like, he taught me how to just not care about what other people's opinions are or how they perceive us. We'll be outside, we have this thing where he'll lift my arm up and he's nose deep in my armpit, and he's bear hugging me and we're smelling on each other's neck. And man, it's like we're just present. We're in the moment, and I know that regulates him. I know that's his way of showcasing his love for me, and vice versa. And that's all that matters. Whatever looks, it doesn't even matter anymore. I stopped explaining myself a long time ago. I mean, I don't need to explain myself because he is who he is, and I love him for it.
Thank you, all of you guys, for sharing all these experiences because I know it's gonna bring up a lot of emotions in the process of reliving a lot of these moments, a lot of these topics, and that's kind of where I'd like to shift our conversation to something we don't always talk about enough, which is mental health. And many fathers, feel pressure to be the strong ones, the providers, the protectors, or the problem solvers, right? So, has there ever been a time where you felt pressure to hide your emotions or carry more than people realized? And if so, how were you able to overcome that and find something that would give you joy to get out of that mental funk? So, I'll open it up to KJ. Do you want to open it up?
I'm good to go. The mental health part of it? No, I am a very straightforward person. I'm a very open person, very direct person. I'll take that back. Yes. It's more so the pressure, I guess, because I'm the only one that doesn't have like a diagnosed something, right? And I failed to mention that my 6-year-old is now going through the process of level 1 autism. So it's more so I have to check on everyone. It's 5 of us. So 4 of us, I have to make sure the four of them are okay, straight. No one's having an anxiety attack. No one's being left out. Everyone has everything they need, but then there's no one to check on me. You know what I'm saying? I have to self-soothe, which I've learned how to do. I have my PlayStation, I have my cigars, so I have learned how to self-soothe myself. But that's why I do things like this, like come on this podcast, because I'm able to vent when I'm not able to vent in front of my wife. Because if I vent that to my wife, then she thinks she's a burden, or she thinks it adds on to another problem that I could be a part of if I vent to her how I feel. The multiple doctor's appointments and having to everything. There's a lot of it. It's a lot to navigate. It's a lot to do. The social, emotional, mental of just the 4 of my family and my loved ones that I have to deal with pretty much by myself, and then just kind of wait for everyone to be, good, then I can enjoy that good. But when it's bad and you got the wife crying because she's having an anxiety attack and you have to calm down the two ADHD kids because they're overwhelmed. You have to go make sure that my kid with Down syndrome that's now hiding because the other people be yelling at each other are okay. And then when everybody goes to sleep, I'm still awake because I am, distressing at that point. I'm calming myself down. So it's still a matter of me having to deal with that on my own because I am alone at that point. You know what I'm saying? Because everybody's been helped at that point. Everyone has received, regional services from dad and husband, and everybody's okay. You know what I'm saying? So dad now has to self-soothe himself. So yeah.
For sharing that. Yeah. And I think that's where culture and our society has failed you men in a lot of regards. When you say, KJ, yes, you're Superman. But it's good that you found a way to self-soothe yourself, but it's also having maybe that moment for yourself to say, it's okay if I'm not okay. It's okay if I can
Right.
process this. It's okay for me not to hold everything together. And if sometimes the dominoes fall, you can always pick them back up the next day. And just giving yourself also that as much support and grace you give your family, giving it back to yourself as well, because you're worthy of that. And I think a lot of the times men don't think they're worthy of that. And that's why I wanted to definitely open up this conversation. How about you,
Mhm.
William?
It's definitely it took a big mental state on me. It was to a point where back in 2023. I felt like I lost myself, lost myself in feelings, emotions, even my relationship with my wife, I just shut down. And, it was a very dark place in my life where, I would never want to go back, but I can honestly say, with the support of my wife, she picked me up, man. She said, you got to snap out of it. We're going to be okay. And, it was to the point where she was helping me out, you know, yeah, it was like a turning point because I was her support. But when I left my career and things shifted, it was to a point where I'm like, I don't know who I am no more. I don't know what's my identity as a person, as a man, as a dad. What do I do? Where do I navigate? I gained about 100 pounds, and it was just a very dark place in my life, So 2024, I was after I came back from Chicago. We started a catering business. I told my wife, I want to start a catering business. My parents did catering about 20 years ago. It was very successful, and I really look up to them the way they did their caterings and events and weddings and all that good stuff. So I told myself, all right, well, I'm gonna try to get into the catering game. I started doing street dogs, and the reason I started doing street dogs was because when I was out in Chicago on a mission on a contract, I was working 7 to 7, 7 days a week. When we got government contracts, there were 7 days, 12-hour shifts. So I was working 7 p.m., 7 a.m. I'll get off at 7 a.m., go to the local store and get me a street dog, sauerkraut dog every day. That was my diet because I just go home, sleep, FaceTime my wife, the kids, go back to sleep, go to work at night. So when I came back, I said, I want to do something with street dogs, something with hot dogs, because I fell in love with hot dogs. So long story short, I told my wife, I'm going to call it J&J Street Dogs, and it's going to be based on autism awareness. And I remember my wife looked at me, she's like, you're crazy. That's not going to work. I said, it's going to work. I know it's going to work. And when I came back from doing my government contract, I I was still doing armed security. So I was working for local dispensaries, helping them out with armed security. And I said, hey, do you mind if I sell hot dogs here? And I pitched them my ideas, and they were like, yeah, go ahead. And I remember my first event, I had the hot dogs, and I had my sister had made me a sign from Walgreens, said J&J Street Dogs, and had the little autism symbol. And it was a big hit. People loved it. They're like, "Hey, what is this about?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm selling street dogs, but I'm an autism dad." And we're catering autism awareness with every bite, and everyone's like, "Wow, this is awesome." So I told my wife, "Hey, we got something going here." And what a lot of people don't realize is, you know. My wife had stopped working too for a while when I was in Chicago, and she took care of the boys. She took care of the boys for about 6, 7 months, and she basically taught Jordan how to talk. He wasn't able to talk. She taught him so many things because she was there, and I was able to provide for our family when I was there. But when I came back, the roles changed. It said, "All right, you go back to work. I'm done. Let me figure out what I want to do." But obviously bills piled up. I wasn't making the money I was making before. And it was this was the hardest moment of my life because we had bought a lot of different furniture and put it in storage, Target furniture and couches and a table to buy a house, and our plans changed. Unfortunately, we couldn't buy a house. And I told my wife, I'm going to sell all the furniture and we're going to get money for our business. And we're going to buy a grill. We're going to buy this and buy that. And My wife could have been like, no, I'm not doing that. You're going to give me the house. We're going to have our dream house. But instead, my wife's like, you know what? Let's do it. I believe in you. I believe in your idea. It was one of the biggest blessings I've ever done, because I've been at this for almost 2 years, and it has taken me to levels where I could never imagine as a dad, as a family, as a business owner. We've done events for, famous influencers for Costco, Panasonic. I bought a van, I wrapped it with autism awareness, with puzzles, and every event that I go to, I have my display, my autism display and who we are and what we do. And I've had events where, five, $6,000 where people are like, I don't want your autism stuff there. I'm not doing it. This is the reason I started my business, and I'm not, if I can't put my autism awareness here, I'm out. I don't care about the money. It's about spreading awareness, so this is my therapy. This is what I love to do. I tell my wife Monday through Thursday, I'm with the kids, taking them to therapy. Right now they're going 3 days a week because they're in summer. Jordan goes to food therapy. So I'm there the whole week. I come home, cook, clean, and I'm proud of it. Do all these catering. The most beautiful part is that we allocate funds to do different events for, special needs families. It's for me, that's a therapy that I needed. Not only Jesus Christ, but this small business has blessed us in so many ways that we took that leap of faith. We basically sold everything to do what we have now, and it made me meet amazing people like Carla. You guys, you gentlemen. And I get to speak with other autism dads and that are going through the first process. That call me and say, hey, my kids just got diagnosed. I can't. I'm not a doctor, but I can tell you, the right measures to take and who to talk to. I'm not gonna be out of scope and be a psychologist, but hey, I can help you because if I did it, you can. So it's been really therapeutic for me to do our caterings, to do our businesses, and it's I wouldn't want it any other way. I tell my wife, I traded in my career for this, but I'm doing something that I love. I'm advocating for my kids, and my kids see that. And one thing about both my boys that they know they're autistic, they know who they are as people, and they're proud of it. That's one thing. My boys, yeah, I'm not gonna lie, they get haircuts every other week. They only wear nothing but Nike clothing.
That's
You know
right.
why? A lot of parents say, "Oh, your kids are bougie." No, they're not. My kids have a disability, and they're always gonna be in the back burner. And I never want someone to say your kid's dirty. That stigma that special needs parents have. I hate to say it.
Right.
I've seen special needs parents get their kids in sweats, dirty shirts,
Yeah,
no
I see it.
haircuts. I'm not doing that to my kids. My
Right.
kids are gonna have dignity. They're gonna have respect. So it comes from where what I've learned in law enforcement to be squared away. My kids are gonna be squared away. So it's just a lot, but it's definitely blessed me. I took a leap of faith, and I always tell I'm not a gatekeeper. I always tell other people, you want to start a business, I'll help you. I know what it's like to be scared to start a business, but hey, have something behind, something empowering. So to me, it's been a blessing, and I just sky's the limit. We have so much plans. We're doing a backpack giveaway August 9th in Moreno Valley for 300 people, 300 kids. Who
Wow.
would have thought? Myself, my wife. We partner up with the barbershop. We're partner up with Carla. Whoever thought we could do something like that for our community? It's something more deeper than just us. It's for everyone. Everyone to know what autism is, what special need community is, to come together. So, I'm just grateful.
In the conversation we had earlier this month with the ladies, with your wife, actually, I invited her as well. She said the same thing. Her therapy was this business.
Yeah.
Therapy, setting up everything, and that you are her biggest supporter, and that you guys are that partnership. And this journey wouldn't have been as easy for her without you next to her. It's great to see that, especially in this community, that it's so hard for that to happen. Like I said, divorce comes up very often in this, in our little world, because it does take a lot of emotional toll, a lot of mental drainage, of all the feelings we're feeling. Like I mentioned, one diagnosis really does not just affect that child, it affects everyone around them. The siblings, the husband, the marriage. I remember when I first received the diagnosis, I would hyper focus on my son. It wasn't until later I realized, you know what, I have a husband, I have another daughter, I have myself to care for. And that's when I started making changes in how I started scheduling respite for my husband and I to go out, because I started seeing us drifting apart, and I'm like, I cannot have my kids be raised with no dad, especially in this kind of journey. And I started spending time with my daughter so she wouldn't have that resentment towards Adrian for us spending so much time with just Adrian. Like it does take that mental toll, and having a good partner or having good solid support, whether it's your parents or a good set of friends, really comes in handy when you're going through these dark moments. How about you, Michael?
Yeah, actually, it really helped me. It really hit me with the mental health as well because I was already struggling with my mom's death. Even though it's been 10 years, it was days that I still cry every day for my mom and dealing with Brandon. And also, I do help out with my mother-in-law. Mother-in-law is 77. She has a lot going on. She just started dialysis. She's in a nursing home and it's a lot. And then I can feel the wife's energy sometimes. The way she's feeling, she wakes up. I can feel her energy. What's wrong? Nothing. Okay, there's something going on. I actually got a referral for mental health because my stomach hurt. I had so much going on that my body was just breaking down as well. And I think the doctors looked at me, I was crazy because, I get all these labs done all the time. And thank God everything came out normal. But it definitely also took a lot out of me too, like with the mental health anxiety, feeling anxious at times. Sometimes I be driving and have to get off the freeway because I feel like I have brain fog. Like I'm like, where's I'm going? And so now I actually started back getting into the gym, working out, learning how to, take in more natural things to help with my anxiety, drinking teas, learn how to meditate, walking, and just things that kind of help me out. And actually, this is the first thing, Carla, I want to thank you also. This actually helped me a lot because I was just telling the wife I needed to love to get with different people and talk about things that's going on, and it's good to see that everybody like, hey, I'm not the only one out there, you know.
Definitely. That's why it's good creating these spaces and just trying to find that community because it's very isolating. It's a very isolating journey if you allow it to get to that point.
Right.
I know we also become more particular with who we invite in our circles. And I think that happens naturally as we grow older. We know how to make better choices with the
Right.
people we surround ourselves with. But with that being said, it can't be taken to the extreme of isolation. So, with that being said, I'll leave it up to you, Dave.
Okay, absolutely. So yeah, in terms of mental health, I mean, as all the guys test to, this journey of raising special needs kids can really have its ups and downs and take its toll. I know I've scheduled appointments with therapists because there'll be periodic and situational moments where my son kind of cycles, and throughout the course of the year there'll be those moments in the year where it seems like the dysregulation is more intensified for a myriad of reasons, but it'll take its mental and emotional toll on me. I've seeked therapy for that. Now that I think about it, just growing up in the family, I did, and in the area I grew up in, I grew up in South Central Los Angeles, so I just grew up around a lot of stuff going on in terms of gang culture and just being a child of the 80s and 90s, seeing, the crack epidemic and seeing a lot of dysfunction even in the household with my parents. And through all that, as a child, you were just told to just kind of turn a blind eye to it. And you were told to just really not process it. Like if I was a kid and I ever approached my mom or my dad that was feeling scared or anxious, they'd just brush it off. They'd be like, "What are you talking about? You feeling anxiety? You just keep it moving. You got school tomorrow. You don't got time to feel anxious." So it was never addressed. So as I grew older, it just kind of pent up, and I was never, I soon found myself as a young man and a man that was never able to, in a very healthy way, process my emotions. So yeah, yeah, mental health is still something that I'm still trying to figure out and go through. And again, man, thank God I got, my wife Carla in my corner, who I can talk to, and who I can be vulnerable with. And thank God I got my kids to live for. And, they've, really helped me, just, become selfless. And I found out that what really gets me out of my depression, my
Mhm.
situational depression or anxiety is not thinking about myself and my own personal problems, but being a servant to others, being the servant to my wife and
Sure.
asking where I can help her, or being the servant to my kids and seeing where I can help them, or a coworker or a friend. And I soon noticed that once I was able to do that and get out of my own head and my own problems, man, that seemed like it was just therapy in and of itself. And back to KJ's point, sometimes, yeah, you do feel like, man, like my wife got a lot going on with the nonprofit and, she's in the middle of this master's program. And then, my daughter, who's level 1, she sees my son going through this severe meltdown. So she's traumatized from that. So I'm having to somehow find a way to console her while mitigating the meltdown with Adrian. And then my wife seeks emotional refuge in me. And sometimes she tells me, man, just you holding me allows me to calm down. So I have to tell myself at times, like, man, I have to stay strong. But as Carla said, I needed to realize, like, I needed that space to say that, man, it's too much for me as well. And I needed a breather. So whether I go outside and do a workout, do some push ups or pull ups or take a walk or even something as simple as like a 5 minute mindful meditation, breathing exercise in the car. Whatever little I can do, to help with my own self care and my own, improvement of my mental state, I do. And it certainly has helped.
Thank you very much. As we begin wrapping up this conversation, I'd like to leave our listeners with one final thought. What gives you hope for the future? And I'll start with you, William.
Okay. What gives me hope for the future is being proactive and learning more about autism and different disabilities. Definitely, I see the change in both my boys with therapy, food therapy. Even engaging in your own therapies at home. I'm very different as a father at home with my boys because I know what they're capable of doing. I know their limitations, so I might push them to the limits, but I do it in a way where I know they can do it. I don't know if I make sense, but I know exactly what their limitations are. So what I leave to any parent, any special needs parent, especially dads, like there's hope, put God first in your life, be selfless, like Anthony said. And you can't be selfish, just put your best foot forward and you got to see what's the best benefit for your kids. And I promise you that you'll see a big difference. You'll see a big difference.
Thank you very much, William. How about you, Michael?
Just keep advocating, praying. I learned a lot of praying and just keep doing my part. Just keep advocating for Brandon, just knowing that it's going to get better. And, in the next 100 years when I'm not around, he's going to be independent. That I feel like as long as I keep doing my part, things just going to, get better for everybody.
What would you expand on that for, let's say, the listeners that are barely starting this journey? What's one word of advice or one advice that you would give them?
Reach out, ask questions. If you're not sure, there's a lot of parents out there. Don't be too shy. Reach out. Always ask questions. That's one thing I didn't ask questions before. I regret it. So, but just asking the right questions, reaching out, getting all the help you can. There's tons of help out there. Make sure you get all the help out there you can, and just advocate for your loved ones.
Thank you. And with you, babe, what gives you hope for the future? And a final thought for the parents barely starting this journey, the fathers specifically starting this journey.
So, what gives me hope for the future is this right here. It's this wonderful platform that you started, and amongst other platforms where you're allowing mothers and fathers and caregivers to share these incredible stories that need to be heard. What gives me hope is the awareness that's being spread, through businesses like J&J Catering to say, you know what, we're not going to just hide our kids. We're going to be out there, stemming in awe, and we're going to love it and we're going to embrace it and we're going to be inclusive about it. And I tell you what, the level of awareness and acceptance I feel in the air, like I'll take Adrian to In and Out and he'll like in his loud voice say something and he don't get like crazy looks anymore. The level of awareness has expanded, like, I mean, exponentially. And it's beautiful to see. It's beautiful to see that, our community is now being heard and being seen for the humans that, they are, for the beautiful people that they are. So, yeah, I'm definitely hopeful. You starting this nonprofit and helping parents and professionals with trainings and resources amongst many out there, it's amazing. And I'm just awe inspired by it all. And so for the new fathers out there, any word of advice I can give you is, just yeah, stay informed. Like my man said, just reach out to people that have been through these lived experiences that can, mentor you and show you an easier path to getting the resources and the services because it's a lot. I remember when Adrian got the initial diagnosis, I mean, it was so much it made your head spin. I didn't know where to start and where it ended. But, you just stay informed and educated and you reach out to regional centers, to your pediatrician, yeah, and to nonprofits and to amazing people like William with J&J Catering that can lend a helping hand. And man, you can move forward and get what your children deserve.
Thank you very much. And KJ, what gives you hope for the future? And what would you want to leave the parents, like a kind of a guide or last words for the parents that are barely starting this journey?
Yeah. So I say hope for the future. Hope for the future that, we just be as supportive as we can for our babies. There's a period, there's a time frame, I guess, in the grieving process where we're selfish because the option that we've been given is not the one we wanted or what we expected. So now we're grieving because we can't give our kids what we thought they wanted. However, God has given us a responsibility, a duty to be stronger than the average parent to get our kids where they need to be. Period. Advice for parents who are just now starting with kids with all over the spectrum, no matter what the diagnosis is. I have led Tiana, I got her in the game and she has like sprinted in this marathon we call neurodivergent and has done so many great things. Yes, reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to support. If you're at a park and you see, we can see our own kids and other families. There's been so many times where I've been at a park and I got my kids' bikes and scooters and skateboards and one of our awesome babies runs over and he jumps on one of our scooters and the parents sprinting over. No, 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 don't do that. Be that parent that said, hey, no, I get you. He's okay. My kids can go do something else. Let him have the scooter for a second. We all good here. You gotta be supportive because especially for, parents with level 3 autism, I've seen friends with kids who stood out right in front of me. I had met a friend who I hadn't seen in years, and she has a level 3 autistic baby. Same school as my kid. And as I'm introducing myself to her and we're catching up on time, she starts stripping right in front of me, just butterball naked. She's like, "Oh my God!" He starts crying. But he does this. I'm like, "It's okay. I saw him before he saw me. I get it. But go home and take go home and take your baby, put some clothes on him." And be okay. But be each other's advocate. Reach out to people. Do not be afraid to take a baby outside. There are great people out here in the world. There are great people who are in our community, but we need to know you're there. We can't be supportive if we don't know you're there. We can't show you what we know if we don't know you're there. Do not hide. I know it's something that you have to overcome. I know it's rough. I know it's a mental thing where you just want to kind of hide you and you do not hide your babies. That is the biggest mistake you can make in this community.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen, and thank you for your honesty, your vulnerability, your willingness to share the stories. And I know that there are so many fathers out there and families that are listening to this that will definitely find comfort, encouragement, and basically a lot of hope through these experiences that you guys have shared. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today on Voices Beyond the Spectrum. I want to extend my sincere gratitude to William, Anthony, KJ, and Michael for sharing your stories with such honesty, vulnerability, and heart. Your experiences remind us of the incredible impact that engaged fathers have in the lives of their children and within our communities. Thank you for allowing us to learn from your journey. Voices Beyond the Spectrum was brought to you by Empathy for Autism California, Inc., a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating, connecting, and empowering families through advocacy, resources, community events, and inclusive programs throughout California. A special thank you to Brad Kalu for producing our music, as well as Sophia Chinnan and Brad Kalu for the beautiful piano performance featured in our intro. If today's conversation resonated with you, please take a moment to like, share, and follow. Voices Beyond the Spectrum is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and YouTube. By sharing these stories, you're helping us amplify the voices of individuals with disabilities, their families, and the professionals who support them. Until next time, continue leading with empathy, embracing inclusion, and remembering that every story has the power to inspire change. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on our next episode of Voices Beyond the Spectrum.